If you've been thinking about going deeper into the Star Wars universe and you tried looking at the books that are out there, you'll see pretty quickly that there are hundreds of books to choose from. Finding a place to start seems a bit overwhelming, but don't worry, I got you covered. I've picked out some extremely important books to start you out with that will take you from a mere Star Wars fan to a full-on Star Wars nerd in no time. The first book you should pick up is probably the best standalone book there is, Darth Plagueis. Written by James Luceno, this book dives into the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise, how he rose to power, his obsession with immortality and creating life from the Force itself, and how he discovers a young Palpatine attending university on Naboo. It takes you through Palpatine's apprenticeship and leads all the way up to and ends during the events of Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. This amazing book is part of the Legends timeline. Now, let's go over two definitions before we continue. Canon versus Legends. I'll be recommending books in both categories. You see, when Disney took over and acquired Lucasfilm in 2012, they made a decision to clean up the Star Wars timeline and more clearly define what content aligned with the films. Now, it's highly debatable that they've accomplished this streamlined story, or maybe made it worse, but that's an argument for another time. The Canon timeline is a story that officially happens in the same continuity as the films. In general, every book and comic and TV show or movie that was released after April 2014 is considered canon, while the huge library of books that came before 2014 is now considered legends. Think of legends as myths or like an alternate timeline. Even though it doesn't officially take place in the same continuity as the films, the Legends timeline is full of so many amazing stories and characters that are absolutely loved by us Star Wars nerds. The next book I want to talk about is Master and Apprentice. This amazing canon book is based around the same time period as the Plagueis novel. It's a prequel to Episode 1. It follows Qui-Gon Jinn and his young Padawan Obi-Wan Kenobi and their struggle to form a bond. This book is important to add some perspective on the early relationship between the two Jedi. It goes into Count Dooku and Qui-Gon's relationship and brings in another one of Dooku's Padawans, Rael Averross. The timeline of this book also leads right up to the events of Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Now let's jump back into the Legends timeline and dive into the origin of the Rule of Two, the Sith Lord that created it and set up the legacy that lasted 1,000 years. This absolutely brilliant trilogy starts 1,000 years before Palpatine destroyed the Jedi. The Sith equaled in number to the Jedi during this time, until Bane joined. He noticed the path the Sith were heading, he remade the order and put in motion a plan that would become fully realized by Darth Sidious 1,000 years later. These books I've read several times over the years and I can't say enough good things about them. Even though this trilogy is under the Legends banner, Lucasfilm has brought Darth Bane's character into canon during the Clone Wars series at the end of Season 6, when Yoda travels to Moraban into the Valley of the Dark Lords and talks to the spirit of Darth Bane. And so just a little bit of extra info, you'll read about the Sith planet Korriban in the Bane books, and in the Clone Wars, that same exact planet is actually referred to as Moraband. Now the next book for those of us Rogue One fans is called Rebel Rising. This is the perfect book to fill in the gaps of who Jyn Erso is. I really liked her character in the movie, but we really don't know a lot about her. This changes all of that. We see a young Jyn rescued by Saw Gerrera on Lamu, trained as one of his partisans, and then of everything that led up to where we see her as a prisoner in the detention center on Wobani. Seeing what she went through gives you a whole new appreciation for Jyn when you inevitably rewatch Rogue One after reading this. It's time now to start making our way into deep waters of Legends, the trilogy that started most people into the Star Wars books universe, the original Thrawn Trilogy. This is probably my favorite series to reread. I've read this I think probably at least 3 or 4 times over the years. These books have a profound effect on both Star Wars canon and Legends. Timothy Zahn wrote this first book, Heir to the Empire, back in 1991. It introduces Grand Admiral Thrawn, a Chiss Imperial officer that was every bit as brilliant as Emperor Palpatine, but more geared towards like military strategy rather than politics. Dave Filoni has brought in different characters, locations, and events from this trilogy into the Disney canon universe because because he was such a huge fan of these books growing up. It takes place about 5 years after the Battle of Endor, and it has some of my favorite characters like Mara Jade, Talon Card, and Han and Leia's twins, Jason and Jaina. Yes, these characters don't exist in the canon universe, unfortunately, but they are some of the best written characters in the galaxy. Now, I could make an entire video just about these 3 books, so let's try and move on. Once you are finished with this trilogy, you have a few avenues to choose from, but I'm going to recommend this. The Canon Thrawn Trilogy was also written by Timothy Zahn in 2017, and this dives into how he's discovered by the Empire, he's brought to Emperor Palpatine, and then he rises through the Imperial ranks as the only alien to do so. The next 2 books in the trilogy dive into missions with both Anakin Skywalker during the Clone Wars, and then later with Darth Vader on Batuu. The 3rd book dives into battling a species from outside the galaxy known as the Grisks. Now that we have the first 12 books under our belt, we have a pretty good idea of different characters and different storylines that we really like. Now, once I read the Thrawn Original Legends Trilogy, I started down a path of books in that timeline that I really like, and I have a feeling you might feel the same. So as a bonus, here's a quick reading list that comes after the Thrawn Legends Trilogy in the order that I recommend. First, The Hand of Thrawn duology. Next, Survivor's Quest. Then, the new Jedi Order series that spans over 20 books where they fight a species called the Yuuzhan Vong. They are an absolutely terrifying species from outside the galaxy that attacks and kills more than 350 trillion sentient beings. Now, there are so many great books that I haven't mentioned, but with this list, you'll be able to at least have a much better understanding of what you want to read next. So click here to see some pretty cool facts about Grand Admiral Thrawn, and may the Force be with you.